just the nature of life right now. That's what he said. So let's talk about that because we're seeing it manifest in different forms. And right now we're seeing the executive and the judiciary almost at a stalemate. When the executive says we don't have enough money for you, we'll have to have some budget cuts right here. Chief Registrar decides to effect budget cuts, but the High Court gives a stay on this particular order. So what happens at this particular point in time as we wait? And the beauty about this, again, as I said, I have two lawyers here, so you know the motions as far as this is concerned. How do you move forward?
Let me start by saying that there is a valid court order, and court orders must be respected. They are not suggestions, they are not opinions, they are orders that need to be implemented. I very much disagree with them. That is what I want to say for a start. But let me also quickly add that it's beautiful that the government for the first time acknowledges that this GDP business they are busy telling Kenyans is a mathematical issue, which when you change one variable, it will look like there's growth. Right. When truly they now admit, for the first time I've heard the government admitting that people really are not feeling the effect of what you're telling them. Right. There is no money in the pockets of Kenyans. Right. People are not getting food on their table. Basic, functions of operations are not being done because we do not have enough resources reaching out to the people. Probably very few Kenyans feel the effect of the growth of this GDP, as they call it, or the economy. But the real effect is not being felt to the general public. Right. So, but the manner in which they want to do budgetary cuts, especially with the judiciary, could be quite unfortunate. Remember, we have always had a problem, argued that the judiciary, there's a lot of backlog, cases cannot be determined within the period of time, and the judiciary has always argued it's a question of capacity. And we have had a trajectory which was quite good, where there was an effort to improve on the infrastructure, to improve in terms of the manpower. We have had quite a number of judges being hired, which unfortunately seems to come to the halt now. We actually, right before this, we had a stalemate where the president has refused to appoint 41 judges who have been vetted by the Judicial Service Commission and recommended for appointment as required under the Constitution. So you can't just wake up and say that we are just slashing this particular budget. According to me, there is no scientific method or basis upon which they made the decision that they are slashing the budget for the judiciary. Right.
The counter-argument was that they're actually doing it across the board. It's not only the judiciary that's been affected by the budget cuts. Executive has also had its share measure of austerity, the legislature as well. So the judiciary was just part of the process in terms of the cuts that needed to be done.
Yes, that could be as well be true. But who will suffer most in the circumstances? Because if we already have a problem, the general public are likely to feel the effect, the hit more. In fact, as we speak, I have seen circulars from various courts where courts have been closed down. Today, as we speak in Malindi, the land court is not sitting. It has been closed and all matters now have been asked to be heard in Mombasa. I have seen the courts in Nyeri have been closed down. There are no judges to attend to this. What happened to the cost of litigation to those people around there, because you're now being forced to move elsewhere to get a solution? And if we do not take care of that kind of setup, particularly at the judiciary, then we are going to have a situation where people are going to get the traditional method of self-help, where, Jeff, I feel you've disappointed me or something's not right. I go look for my panga and I come, I deal with you.
Take justice into your own hands.
Justice into my own hands. Because there is lack of hope that this can be able to be implemented by the courts.
Honorable Kioni, let me bring you in on this, and let's look at it from the other point of view, in the sense that if the government really doesn't have money, it doesn't have money. Even if this particular court order, if they say, okay, fine, we want to pay, but we don't have, how do we move forward at such an impasse?
An opportunity for us to speak to that issue, and unfortunately, at the wrong time, when we are really having to say things that we should not be saying, like actually. I think the thing is that we are running short of revenue. And for reasons that perhaps we can be able to trace them going backwards, or a couple of months, years back. Right. But I want to say this. One, the reason why the budget-making process was changed under the new Public Finance Management Act and involving Kenyans in the budget-making process is so that when we are making money, you are part of it. When you are not making money, you are part of it. Right. In other words, you know what we said and how we said it. I think there's a mistake that occurred. And this was picked by the Budget Committee in Parliament. The estimates that were given by the then CS, Rotich, there was some little bit of questioning. Are you certain that we are going to attain this kind of revenues? Right. And there was a doubt. He seems to have overplayed his card, and it's come back to bite us. And I think Kiatani is living up to reality, and he's telling us this is the reality. We can't continue living on you know, things that we cannot afford. And we will need to pay attention to what he is saying. And I can tell you that this is for real. I don't want to concentrate on myself, but I had an invitation to a country. Last week I was supposed to have traveled on Saturday. But for the same reason, even Parliament, we cannot move. There are quite a number of cuts that have been done within Parliament, and there are many things you cannot do until the situation improves. And I'm giving myself as an example. So it's not hearsay, it's something that is hitting us. But there is another fundamental issue that I want to mention here. You know, when you talk about, and the question is right, even court orders must be court orders that can be applied. Right. It's good to go to court and say, give the judiciary money. But if there is no money, what happens? You are not going to hang the CS treasury if there is no money. So it's necessary to have this court order, but it needs to be backed with evidence that there is some money. Of course, one of the questions that comes is now, how is it that Uhuru is going out at this level? And we have, so this, he has also perhaps to come and tell us. And as we labor with this issue, there is the committee chaired by Koinange, a member for Parliament, I think for Kiamba. He said, no, not Kiamba. Yes, Kiamba, I think. Yes. We should be able to come and tell this, tell the Kenyans, how is it that we are getting this money? Was it part of the budget allocation? Or is there some money coming from elsewhere? But the issue here is this. There is what we have in the Constitution refers to as judiciary fund, or the judicial fund. And what should happen is that once we have done the budget, the money for judiciary should be deposited into that fund, so that even as the executive is struggling, the judiciary is operating independently. The other day, I introduced a similar, an amendment to the Constitution to introduce a similar fund for Parliament. And for the state was all over the social media. Everybody was saying, you cannot do that. You are shielding yourself from scrutiny. That is far from the truth. Those funds are also scrutinized by the Auditor General. And they should only be used in line with what was approved by Parliament during the budget-making process. But it guarantees that in the event that the executive mismanages their kitty, the judiciary, the legislature is able to operate independently and even oversight that other institution that may have misused the money. Now, in Parliament, we are also curtailed because we are told you cannot access money from IFMIS, meaning even oversighting why the president is going out to make those trips becomes difficult. And I am taking this opportunity to try and bring out that it is very important for the judicial fund and parliamentary fund, the judiciary fund and the parliamentary fund, to be made operational. During the budget making process, let us be very rational, very careful, very keen, not to then over-allocate if we do not have enough money. But to give money enough to ensure that these three arms of government are operating. And in the event that the executive has mismanaged this account, it should not be made for the other arms to suffer, because they will stop performing their useful role. Like now, when the judiciary cannot carry on with the issue of delivering justice, like others have said, it is not the judges who are suffering. It's not the magistrates, it's not the staff. It's the ordinary Kenyan who cannot get that justice. We cannot sort out the several cases that would have helped us continue, doing business. So it is, it's one thing, the orders must be orders that can be implemented when they come out of court. But it's also a question of also having fidelity to our Constitution, making sure that what implementation of the Constitution is done, and that is the work of my committee. And I can tell you, when it comes to issues of the fund, the executive has, and the CS Treasury has refused, I use the word refused, to operationalize the judicial fund, the judiciary fund, and also we are likely to get, we are likely to amend the constitution and create a parliamentary fund so that these funds have funds to allow all these arms to continue working.
Honorable Kioni, let me just ask as we talk about that, because some people are saying that these problems, in fact, even with the judiciary, probably started also in Parliament. It's all of these tribunals that were created for every single issue. So you find you have an environmental court and a tribunal, and all of this is just being paid by the same taxpayer. So there's so much duplication of these roles within the judiciary, and now this is why we're having this type of overspend.
Perhaps not, but that's also an issue that needs to be addressed. I don't think that is the cause of our problem. The cause of our problem is that we have an economy that peaks. And I believe this is why we need to really think about BBI. We have an economy that peaks, but every 5 years it dips. You peak before we get to where we can actually grow the country, and the trickle effect will be there. We are down again, like the Malaysian airline. You remember that 370 that went down and we never saw it? You've taken off very nicely, but 5 years down the line, we go down. We must address ourselves to that issue. It's now hitting us. It did hit us 2013, kidogo. 2017, it had hit us You remember how 2006, we were growing at 7%. And there was an estimation that if we continue and hit 10%, this country, then we can talk of the many, many things that we had, including Vision 2030. And that, I go back to BBI because BBI is an opportunity for us to address the issues that slow down our economy to the point where now we cannot even afford to have judges in court when we need them most. Right. So these are issues that you cannot look at them in isolation. Right. And it's not something that you can say it started from a given point. It is the way we have managed our politics, actually. This is really the way we have managed our politics. And it's not a problem with politicians, because when you say politics, Kenyans are quick to say, it's not our politics, it's the way, our elections are so, they are so vicious. It's like after these elections, some of us are likely to be swallowed by the world. It's like the other will open and swallow some of us. And for as long as we compete that way, I have a feeling that this can only get worse. And even as you talk about that, let's move. But still keep it matters money, because the front page of the Daily Nation talking about MPs vote for return of expensive loans. Tough times ahead. House team agrees with President Kenyatta on removing interest rate caps, throwing SMEs and ordinary Kenyans, as the Daily Nation says, under the bus and making the going even more difficult for many. Dennis, from where you sit, because it's almost like a catch-22, because the reason the rate cap had been put in the first place was to make sure that now the citizen can get a loan that he can afford. The banks realized that this doesn't make business sense and decided to give the money to the government. Now that the rate cap is off, and the situation as is right now in the economy, will the citizens now get this money at really high rates? Have we created another problem from where you stand?
I think it goes both ways. In the sense that, yes, banks withdrew these loans to general public, that you could not easily access a loan because the banks felt they cannot make money that they're required to make. And it means that if you were in some business and you wanted some little funding, you were not able to get that funding. And the money was going to government. Basically, that is the only institution that was getting some level of funding from even commercial institutions. However, we need to get some level of shield, because what has happened previously, if you follow the history before these interest capping rates was introduced, was that banks used to really, if you could allow me use that word, molest the general public, in the sense that you take a loan, and by the time you're taken to court and you've taken a mortgage, and they have attacked your property and all that, they have charged it. By the time you go to court they take you to court for recovery, what they are demanding is 2 times what you were given as a principal loan. In fact, your main problem is not even the loan you took, is the interest that you're dealing with. Right. And Kenyans have always been losing. You take a loan in good faith, but you lose everything, your contributions plus the property, to the bank. And it's just not to the bank, but there are business people who are making a lot of money out of it. Because the time when you've paid so much, you've paid twice that loan, it never ends, then the property is taken and somebody comes and buys it off at a very affordable cost.
Right.
You can't get it, you can't recover it because you already spent, not able to do anything. So really, I think there should be some level of, they're striking a balance between scrubbing this rate and protecting the general public from exploitation.
Right.
Yes.
Let's look at that tricky balance that seeks to be achieved right here, Honorable Kioni, with this. Because now as it stands, the banks now will decide how they want to set the interest rates. Is this what Kenyans need at this moment in time?
Only that I don't think the debate has come to Parliament unless the nation media is actually whipping us. They're actually campaigning for the capping to go. Because this, I know the memorandum was led to us in Parliament. It was before the committee. I don't know whether the committee is recommending that because we have not received the report. But there are a couple of things that have happened. One is that and we had a meeting with people from the private sector the other day, and it's amazing that we had the private sector actually calling for the removal of the capping. We had even some individuals from the SMEs saying, and this happened in less than 10 days ago, where we had been assembled as the leadership of the House. And they were saying, it is important for you to remove this capping because it is hurting us in this number of ways. But one of the arguments that has been put on the table is that what happened when we put the capping is that an ordinary person became too risky to give money because the risk is not covered by any, there is no interest enough to cover the risk that comes with giving you money, as opposed to when you give money to the government, because the government, one is, of course, is going to be there all the time. It's not, I don't want to use the legal language. It's going to be there. You can die. The government will not die. Every other person who comes will always repay the debt that was borrowed by the bank. So for the banks, it's always easy to give money to the government. And for that reason, the ordinary Kenyans, the people with small businesses, could not access money from the bank. And you can actually tell if Rotich or now a attorney walks in and asks for money, and you walk in with your small business enterprise asking the same manager to give you some money to go and grow your Rotich or your attorney will be given the first priority and at a lower interest rate because there is a surety that they will pay. You could go perhaps get an accident and perhaps you get your own paid by the insurance, but there is more struggle to get the money paid by an ordinary person doing business. For that reason, what we thought was going to help the ordinary people ended up helping the government. But you cannot fail to fault the government because the government should avoid going to the same market that ordinary people are going. And that is where the balance comes in. If you remember, I think again, before we went for the 10 days recess that we had, we allowed the government to borrow, increasing the ceiling to 9 trillion. But 9 trillion, not that the government should borrow 9 trillion, but it's 9 trillion that should take us to beyond 2024. The only amount of money that we allowed the government to borrow this financial year is 635. And for what purpose? For them to go and retire. The word that is used in that profession is retire the very expensive loans. Borrow cheap loans, come and pay off the expensive loans so that you can release money back to the economy for circulation to improve and perhaps release us from the kind of strain that we are having. So it is a chain of things that are happening. And if the government was to be faithful to that arrangement, we will see a relief coming very quickly to what is happening, to where we are. We are really having, every one of us can feel the pain, the pinch that is there in the economy. So if the government was to do what they have promised to do, if the rates, the interest rates are then removed, it means that there will be money available for people to, the banks will call you now to go and borrow money at a slightly higher interest rate than before because they will have to cover the risk. But the money will be available to start circulating in the economy.
There's something
to answer what, I don't know whether it's what he was raising, but There's the issue that you borrow 300,000 shillings and you are required to pay 1.2,
Right.
4 times, 5 times, sometimes even 10 times. And it gets to even a point where the amount of money that is required from you cannot even be repaid from the asset that you used to secure. But I think sometimes back, during 10th Parliament, if I'm not wrong, we passed a law in Parliament where we said the amount of money that you are required to repay to the financial institution should never be beyond double. The maximum it should go, if it's 300, 600. That is, the interest should never grow to beyond double the amount of money. So that there is a rule already, which should not be broken by the banks. And I think as this is being done, we will need the budget committee to reassure us, to reassure Kenyans that that rule still apply.
Right.
And I think the other important thing is that I think, which the debate that has taken place informally is that even in the event that we are not able to stop the removal of the capping, we must be seen to protect those people who borrowed when that capping was there.
Right.
They should not just be exposed tomorrow to another rate of interest rate. And because that would be unfair.
Right, and even as you look at this, from the assent that the president might give on this particular issue, is there a likelihood of Parliament summoning 2/3 to keep the cap in place?
That's actually why I think the people, including those in the media, are already concluding. And even some of us in Parliament can tell you that to get 2/3, it's a very, and that was the reason. That was the essence of the 2/3, the supermajority thing.
Right.
So to get 2/3, it must be a very, it's a very difficult thing, actually.
Right.
Even to amend the constitution when you require 2/3 is a very difficult thing.
Right.
Because one is that you have to ensure that nobody is out of the country. It is a time when even those in hospital will need to be brought to their, you have seen sometimes people brought to the floor to vote with the oxygen masks. That is a time, those are the kind of things that would have to happen.
So it almost seems
and
like
again, there are also some members who really, there are many laws in Parliament. There is the issue of registration, there is the issue of oversight, there is the issue of representation. There are some members who are very strong in representation and oversighting. But when it comes to registration, is not their strong area, so they don't quite pay a lot of attention. And it's the nature. There are also those who are very good in registration. They are always on the floor registrating, but they are also weak in representation. Right. So because of that, to get 2/3, it is work. You require the whole government to mobilize everybody.
Right, and of course, that's a story that you can get on your front page of the Daily Nation, and plenty more therein. Your tweets are coming in. Before we actually take our break, there's a tweet from Gideon Langat saying, the executive is a problem, and we, the people, citizens elected, are wrong government. That's why we're paying for that right now. In terms of his faith as far as his government is concerned. Edison Moas, watching K24 this morning, loving the discussion we're having so far. We need actual solutions right now. Jared Okoyo Magare saying, tuned in from Nyobe, best wishes to all schools in Nyamira as far as the exam is concerned. Loving the debate that's going on this morning. Let's continue to discuss these big issues. Githungori Eunice from Londiani. Good morning, team right there, loving the discussion that's going on so far. Keep your tweets coming in. You can get us at K24 TV. You can also get us on 21222. We are back after the break. The county that's Nairobi yesterday should have had its first meeting after recess in terms of the county assembly. What happened was chaos and drama. Should we relook this whole Nairobi County government and probably look for a way forward in terms of the politics of the day? We discuss that as we come back after the break.